Welcome to the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, hosted by your favourite duo, Stephen and Charlene. They're here to help you transform your mindset and create a positive outlook on life. Are you tired of feeling stuck and unfulfilled? Are you ready to take control of your thoughts and emotions and rewrite your story? Well, you're in the right place. They will be sharing inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you on your journey to a better you. You'll learn how to let go of negative self-talk, embrace your strengths, and focus on the good things in life. Each episode will be joined by amazing guests who have rewritten their own life stories and are now living their best lives. From successful entrepreneurs to accomplished athletes, we'll bring you stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. So grab a cup of coffee, get cozy, and get ready to be inspired. Tune in every week for a new episode of the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Let's rewrite our stories together and make every day count.
In this episode of Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, we hear about Kelly Ferguson. Kelly's path took an unexpected turn when her son Bailey was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at just 6 months old. Kelly and Drew faced the challenges of navigating a world of disability with unwavering strength. But that was just the beginning of their story. Fast forward 15 years, and tragedy struck again when Drew, her husband, was involved in a horrific accident caused by a drunk driver. He endured months in the hospital and almost 2 years unable to walk. Just as they were rebuilding their lives, Kelly received a breast cancer diagnosis. Yet she faced each challenge head-on, refusing to let them define her. So join us as we delve into her story.
Before we get started, we want to remind you that the information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are their own and do not represent the views of any organisation or entity. Additionally, any information presented should not be taken as legal, medical, or financial advice. Always consult with a licensed professional in the respective field for any advice or guidance. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic and learn how to transform our lives through positive thinking and taking control of our stories. Thanks for joining us.
Before we begin, we want to give you a heads up. We may be discussing some sensitive and personal topics that might bring up some strong emotions or discomfort. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space, but we know that everyone's experiences and triggers are different. If you start feeling overwhelmed or triggered during an episode, remember to prioritize your well-being. It's totally okay to hit pause and take a breath. Your self-care is important, and looking after your mental and emotional health should always come first. If you ever need extra support, we encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional or someone you trust. You're not alone, and there are resources available to help you on your personal journey. Thank you for joining us on this incredible ride with the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Together we'll navigate life's challenges and rewrite our narratives with strength and resilience.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen and Charlene, and today we're interviewing Kelly Ferguson. Now, Kelly has an amazing story, and if I think there's one word that sums up Kelly, it's resilience.
Absolutely.
You've had quite a few challenges and trials and 3 major significant events that have shaped who you are and also your family. So Kelly, let's go straight into it. Tell us about before you were married, before you had children, and before those 3 major events started.
So yeah, I got married quite young, which was what was done in the day. Met my husband and we got married when we were in our early sort of to mid-20s, and we had my son very quickly because we'd been told that I would have trouble having children. So we kind of, where we had that plan of we'll wait a few years, we kind of went, well, we'll start trying straight away. They were a little bit wrong about that, and clearly we had him 12 months after we were married. And so yeah, he was born and I fell pregnant very quickly with my daughter, and that was a big shock. That was one of those moments in life. 5 days after I found out I was pregnant with her, my son Bailey was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So that all happened at once, and that was very traumatic as first-time parents. And it was very sudden. Often with cerebral palsy and disabilities, there's kind of that lead up where you know something's wrong with your child, but you don't really know what it is, and you lead into it. For us, we had absolutely no idea that there was anything wrong with him, and he just had like an eye that he had a cast eye, and we took him to a specialist. And so that was very, very sudden diagnosis and very traumatic point in our life. And that was probably the first point that changed our world as we knew it, definitely. But we went on to have our daughter 14 months later. And then we thought we'd go for child number 3 before they started school. And then we had twins. So we actually ended up with 4 children, 4 and under, 1 that had a disability. So it was crazy, crazy times back then. And he was having a lot of therapy. So it was just hectic. That's all I can remember about that period of our life, is it was just crazy, busy and hectic.
Yeah. And with Bailey's disability, obviously that being something new, you weren't aware. How did that affect you as a mum?
Yeah, we had no idea. I remember my husband actually saying to the specialist, the only thing we could relate it to, I don't know if you remember the comedian back in the 90s, Steady Eddie. And my husband was like, Steady Eddie, is that what our son's like? And he said yes. And so that was all we could relate it to. So I did a lot of research. I mean, what else could I do? I mean, we grieved. The first thing we did was grieved, and we grieved a lot. And then we made a really big decision together. We went away for a few days and hid away from the world. And we kind of went, well, this is it. We're going to have to do the best we can with it. And the grief continued. It never really goes away. You just kind of learn to live around it, I guess. But we grieved a lot. And then we sort of accepted it. And I just know that there was one day that I was laying on the bed and I was feeling so sorry for myself, and I was sick and I was pregnant and I was vomiting and I had Bailey in my arms. And I actually said to my husband, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. Like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And thinking he would be slightly sympathetic, he kind of goes, that's just ridiculous. Get up. Like, you can't. He kind of chipped me for it. And I remember I sort of lay there and went, oh, okay, then I best get up. So I did. So I got up and I went and picked up the old phone in the days that wasn't mobile phones, and I rang the Spastic Centre, now called Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and I just said to them, I need help. I've had a son who was diagnosed. It's not what you think will happen as a first-time parent. You know, the grief's still there, right?
Yeah.
Now 24 years later, you can see the emotion there, because it all comes back to you. It's not what you think is going to happen when you have your first child, that's for sure. And not what you see everyone else doing around you either. So it's a shock, and it's emotional, and it's hard, and it was brutal. Yeah, but we embraced it. And I think that was the first point where I made those decisions. I remember saying to my husband, how long will people feel sorry for us before they try and avoid us in the street? You know, if we're always going, oh, life's so hard, you know, how long till people kind of then are going to be like, we don't want to see them? So we made a really conscious decision to be positive. And when we weren't feeling positive, we're going to fake it till we make it kind of scenario. And that's what we did. And eventually, I think if you fake something long enough, it actually becomes your reality. So that positive thing that we were trying sort of actually ended up being who we became in the end. And I'd go to first birthday parties, and all the kids, you know, Bailey's at one point, he was having 100 seizures a day.
Wow.
And he was almost like a vegetable. And I'd go to these first birthday parties and the kids are all running around, and he was there just like in this state that I can't even explain to you. And I'd wear sunglasses so that if I cried, no one could see it. And I'd cry, but I wouldn't let them see it. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that was kind of the first, and that's not to say I'm not real with people around me, but, you know, a first birthday party is not the time and place to be kind of airing those emotions. And it's really hard when you're seeing other people live around you like that. So I think that was the first time I made that decision. And then people kind of looked to us after that. We had a few people that had kids with disabilities, and we mentored them, and we sort of spoke how we got through it, and we helped people. And then I realized the power in that. And I think once I realized that there was power in able to take people under your wing and just help them and give people some hope, then I think that kind of kept me going. That's, you know, set me up. I don't think I realized how poignant those moments would be for later in life. I don't think I realized when I went through all that with Bailey and made those decisions and then found out that we were able to be really positive and we were able to help people. I quite realized the impact that it would have for my whole life ahead, because obviously you don't know what's ahead. But yeah, it was definitely a choice that we made then.
Kelly, can I just ask, do you feel like having had the opportunity to mentor other people in that situation was part of your healing, like some of your healing towards that?
A little bit, maybe, yeah, probably healing, or just learning to live with it, or just, I'm a very big believer in so many bad things happen to people. And I think that you know, I'm a big believer in you can always find something good in amongst that tragedy. So, and be it the chance to help somebody else, be it just little things. It doesn't mean the situation's good. I don't believe that, but I always believe you can kind of grab something good, even if it's the support from the people around you and go, how good were the people around me? Or the fact that I can help other people. There's always just something good. And I guess maybe that helps with healing, and it just helps you kind of find some good in it. So through all of this, what good can we take out of this? And I guess at that point it was helping other people who I know how they felt. I obviously felt that way, and I know how brutally traumatic that can be. So to be able to help them, give them hope, point them in the right direction, especially when Bailey was a bit older, you know, to be able to say we were in your position and now look at where we're at with him. And these are the things that helped us, all the early interventions, all the right services, you know, all of those sorts of things. So, and just emotionally help people. Yeah, maybe healing.
Kelly, knowing a little bit about you through a third party, that you never treated Bailey different to your other children. Like it was, you know, get on with it, get on with life. Did he go to a special school, or was he in a mainstream school? Like, how did you deal with that schooling side of it?
Bailey went through mainstream. We actually spent a lot of time selecting his school. And I remember going to a couple of appointments, and there was one where the school forgot I had an appointment. So I was like, well, if you're not interested in having Bailey, then you don't get him. So it was more like I wanted the school to want him. And I was actually ended up being our local school, but the principal there really wanted him to go there. And that's what I wanted. And then he went to our local high school. And in fact, quite the opposite thing happened. The Department of Education wanted to shut down the support class that was at the local school, and we had to fight really hard. They wanted to send him to a school for kids with special needs, and we fought so hard for that, and it became a bit of a media thing. And we ended up, fortunately, they kept that open for him. Not for him, for the kids that were there, but he was one of them. And that was the best thing. So he went to mainstream high school. And do you know what? He finished his HSC, smashed it and passed, which was, you know, he didn't pass brilliantly, but he passed. So he was able to have those same opportunities that other students have, as well he should have, you know. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly times and certain diagnoses that might need schooling that requires additional support. But we knew for Bailey that he would be okay in that mainstream supported environment. And so that was a really good decision for him. And we have always treated him like, sometimes people are a bit horrified because our family's learned to we laugh a lot and we make fun of each other a little bit. And that's kind of just how we roll, you know, and we've kind of got that strange humor. We just kind of laugh about things. So sometimes I think people are a bit horrified when they hear us. We love and adore Bailey, but we do actually, yeah, he's good fun. We have a lot of fun with him, and we're all fiercely protective as well. But yeah, I'd like to think we've treated him the same as the other kids.
Yeah.
Well, definitely with my interaction, seeing you as a family, I've seen that as well. And we'll come to an event that was hosted last year in your honor. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last year that we attended and saw your whole family. Fast forward a few years, you're at a family holiday or a...
Yeah, so we fast forward a few years. So we just kind of got fairly normal for a bit. And then we went on actually my husband he was in the police for many years and had a bit of a PTSD breakdown. And that was a bit sad. And he couldn't go back to work. So the psychologist at the time sort of said, and it all happened right at Christmas. So we couldn't really get him help over Christmas. So the psychologist said, look, just what do you like doing? And he said, I like being with my family. So the advice was, go away with your family, have a break, de-identify from work. You know, what do you like doing while you're on holidays? I like being with my kids. We motorbike ride, we wakeboard, we do those things. And the psychologist said, we'll go and do those things. So we were away on a family holiday, and Drew went for a bit of a motorbike ride with the kids on a property down south. And it's a very long, complicated story, but the long and short of it is a driver who was heavily under the influence of alcohol hit Drew at a very high speed, and he was very significantly injured in the bush with everyone out looking for him, emergency services, and the guys kind of, you know, wanted to take off a little bit because they knew that they'd probably done the wrong thing. And Drew was laying in the bush, and it was about 6 o'clock at night. He was a bit concerned that if they left him there, He didn't know what his injuries were, but he was worried he'd die. And he thought that, so his bike had actually gone so far under the car that they couldn't drive the car. So they're trying to get the bike out from under the car. He was laying in the bush. And he didn't walk properly for many years after that, but somehow he managed to get himself from the bush to the back of their car. Adrenaline is an amazing thing. The human body can be amazing at times, because I think he knew that was his chance to survive and they couldn't leave him. So he got himself into the back of their car and they passed other vehicles. One was a police car and they didn't stop, even though that they knew that they were out looking for Drew. They stopped when they saw, I think it was RFS. And then they stopped and said, this is obviously who you're looking for. So he was airlifted back to Sydney. I was on scene not long after. At the time, obviously my background's as a paramedic, so I was out looking for him in the bush. So I was on scene, which is kind of, you know, one of those worst nightmares as an ambo, turning up to a big scene like that and it's a family member. It's actually kind of living out your worst fear in life. But we got him back to Sydney. He was pretty injured. He spent 5 months in hospital. He didn't really walk properly for probably up to about 2.5 years. So just every time we'd get him back on his feet, something had happened. He'd get a fracture or another surgery or something like that, that we just kept rolling over and rolling over. Felt like there was just no end to it. But what was really sad too was Bailey had surgery not long before that, and he was literally in a wheelchair as well. So we'd been keeping him off his feet down the coast. So I kind of, when that all happened with Drew and I'm at the hospital, I'm like, how do I push 2 wheelchairs? I don't even think that's possible. So it was kind of hard. It was a really hard time. It was horrible. And the kids were quite young and, you know, Drew was in hospital for 5 months. And what ended up happening was all of that kind of combined with the PTSD before the accident just escalated him. So there was a lot of trauma, both emotionally and physically. Yeah, there was a lot to deal with.
How did you find the strength to carry on?
Oh, I tell you, that really is a really tough part of my life. If I think about it, it was tough. I think I'm very much a, what do I need to do? Once I have a plan, like in any event, I go, what do I do? What am I going to do? What do I need to do? And then once I kind of have a plan, then I just go, that's what I have to do. And I focus on that. And I'm fairly driven. And it was the first time with him, it took me a few days to get to that point. Because normally I'm very quick at like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I just remember being in the hospital and I was just like, my head was spinning and I couldn't even, you know, my mum had just passed away a few months earlier. My son had had surgery. There'd been a lot going on and I couldn't quite, and then the breakdown, the PTSD, so my head couldn't even catch up to what was going on. But I think I just went, like I literally in the early days, and this is what I tell everyone, I just went hour at a time. I just like, how do I get through this next bit? How do I get through the surgery? Like the first day, I've just got to get through to the end of this surgery. I just couldn't look too far ahead. So I just was living, you know, I'd wake up in the morning and that goal was to get out of bed. And then once I got out of bed, okay, I've got to do this. And then I'd go and do that. And I wouldn't look too far ahead because I couldn't. I just didn't have that capacity. And I think, you know, I'd tell anyone going through a hard time to do that. Don't be too hard on yourself and try and work a week or 2 weeks ahead. Sometimes it may only be half an hour. That's all you can just go, I've just got to get up, getting up out of bed. Some days I struggled, but I had to because the kids were here with me. So I didn't really have a choice. I just had to keep going. Like there was just no other way.
Yeah, because at that time you're managing a husband that's had quite a significant injuries. You're managing a son with a disability.
In a wheelchair.
Still recovering, yeah. So he's still recovering.
3 other kids as well.
3 other kids, yeah. And 2 of those kids had been with Drew when the accident happened. They were riding with him. So 2 of them were fairly traumatized. And one, she didn't go riding because she'd actually we thought she'd broken her wrist that day. So she was with me splintered. So we had follow-up medical appointments with her to find out what was going on with her. We had Bailey still recovering. He wasn't meant to be weight bearing and walking much. And then the other 2 were completely traumatized because they were with him. They didn't see it, but they were out riding with him. And then Drew. So I kind of guess I was the one that was like, you know, it's in those moments where I guess, I don't know if it's the mothering instinct kind of kicked in. I just had to do it because I didn't have a choice. Can't fall apart. What happens if I do? So for me, I get through stuff and then I fall apart a bit later. You know, that time comes, but it's usually a little bit later for me.
Yeah.
So
who was there for you during this time?
Yeah.
I've got some really good, beautiful friends, and I believe you know one of them very well. And so they were there for me. And do you know what? The whole community like the community, it was a big thing in our community because Drew's in the police, I'm in the ambulance, and also we're local. So do you know what? The community really forged ahead. Our really good friends jumped in day one, and she's a nurse and she sat with me at the hospital, and they kind of took the lead early in the piece. They like that online thing where people could deliver meals. And can I tell you that Drew was in hospital for 4.5 months and we had a meal delivered every day for 4.5 months from people. We had community people dropping food at our door. We had so much support. It actually blew my mind away with how much support we had. So I have to be honest, who was there for me? The whole community was.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, people organized, because I left everything down the coast. I got on the helicopter. I left the kids, the dog, like everything down there. And so I didn't even have a car. I didn't even have a front door key. So everyone kind of rallied in and organized a car for me to drive while other people were down there packing us up and bringing us home. Like, it was chaos. The kids had to go to school. Like, it was January. After a few weeks, they had to go back to school. So people were coming and taking them and buying them back to school things because I was at the hospital. So it was really just a beautiful, again, you take out, like, I look back now and go, the community was incredible. And that's such a beautiful thing to experience. Like, it's so humbling, but it teaches you the importance of that. If other people are going through things, just those little things, it was just amazing. Somebody dropped off a big box of snack food for the kids for school. Like, who even thinks about that? It's amazing.
How did this affect your relationship after the hospital? Like, did you start having to not become a parent to your husband, but obviously a full-time carer as well?
Yeah, absolutely. For years, I was a full-time carer. It has a massive impact. Yeah, it eventually broke our relationship down. We separated for a while, and it's very hard. I cared for him for years, and I did become that carer. Was I resentful? Probably. Was he resentful of it? Probably. We both had a lot of unresolved trauma. We both had a lot of resentment. We both had stuff that was going on. So it took its toll. And for us, that's how it took its toll. I mean, we were very fortunate that we got back together. And I think that maybe that space apart, again, was a really good thing. We just had time to sort some stuff out and, look at where we were in life and what we wanted. So, and when we sort of came back together, it wasn't as carers, it was as husband and wife again. So it was kind of, it was a really good resolution to that.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you were inspired to write a book about everything that happened. Tell us a bit about the journey of writing a book. Well, the podcast is Rewrite Your Story. So
yeah, so a lot of people kept saying you should write a book, you should write a book. And I really just started journaling. I realized long after Drew's accident that I had a lot of kind of this unresolved trauma. And so I thought it would be good just to write it all. So it really didn't start as a book. It really just started as just journaling it and getting it all out and trying to deal with my emotions as that happened. And then it kind of morphed into a book. And I never really expected that it would take off or be published or anything. I just really did it. And I always thought, well, if nothing else, the kids will have it there, because they were quite young at the time, although they've got memories, they probably don't remember it fully, but it did get picked up by a publisher. And that was, I came home to the kids and I said, oh, I've got something to tell you. And when I say that, everyone, because sometimes I come out with these statements, and this was one of those moments. I said, oh, so I've just got signed up to publish a book. And they go, what book? What are you talking about? And I said, oh, I wrote a book. And they all went, when did you write a book? Like, when did you have time? Then they said, what's the book about? And I was like, well, it's pretty obvious what the book's about, isn't it? It's about our story. So then they wanted to read that. They pretty much only read the chapter on themselves initially and read that chapter. So that was a bit of a surprise. Drew kind of knew in the background what was going on. And some of them knew I'd been sort of writing stuff down, but they weren't sort of, 100% sure that it had been written into a book. So that was quite funny. So yeah, so that was an interesting journey. It took a very long time and it was actually really brutal. I'd write as much as I could and then I'd find I was just emotionally exhausted. And to be honest, sometimes I'd put it aside for like a year. I couldn't even look at it. And then I got to the point where I'd written half and I just kept stopping at Drew's accident. So the early stuff I was okay with, and I just kept stopping. I just couldn't get beyond that. And obviously that was just, I hadn't kind of really unpacked all those emotions. And so as I wrote that was it's pretty grueling writing about your story and emotions in such an open manner. And I kind of promised myself if I was going to do it, I'd try and be fairly honest in the book. You know, there's no point doing it if you're just picking out the good bits. So there's some really, you know, and I had to say to their family, are you all happy with that? You've all got to be happy with what I've written because anyone can read it. So, you know, you're bearing your soul essentially, and that's quite hard too. So besides the emotional stuff, which was hard, it's also really hard to then go, this is the truth of it. I mean, some things I kind of, you know, didn't put as much about Drew in there because I felt some things we just needed to keep personal, but the story is all there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so you write this book and you land your dream job.
Well, it was kind of, yeah, look, it was never, I did it just to see what would happen, but yeah, like it was due to be published and it was all very exciting, and we were very close to it being released, unbelievably close. And as you know what I'm about to say, at the 11th hour of writing a book about all the story of the tragedy and the trauma in our life, I was then diagnosed with breast cancer. So we could not believe the tragic irony of that. And it delayed the release of the book. And in the end, the breast cancer journey went on a bit longer. So we released the book without adding anything to it. So it doesn't actually have this kind of end of the story. And that was really sad. Like, it was really sad. The timing as well. Like, the timing was just unbelievable. But, you know, that's life. You never know what's around the corner.
And I know your breast cancer diagnosis came as a bit of a shock and in the circumstances. And I think it's really important that you, like, when we came to your charity, not your charity night, but you hosted an event for Pink Ribbon to bring awareness to breast cancer. What really struck me is you had no physical signs of lumps, and yet you were still diagnosed with breast cancer. So had you not had pain, because you said you experienced pain, but there was no lumps, you would not have known that you had breast cancer.
No, that's exactly right. So it's very frightening. I had a sharp pain through my breast through a couple of nights in a row, and it was unlike anything I'd ever had. So I do have a history of breast cancer in my family. I do not have the BRCA gene, but there's a definite history. My mother had breast cancer. My grandmother died of breast cancer. So they essentially, I was kind of a little bit probably more cautious than other people may have been. And I'd just come home from living and working in Queensland for 6 months. So I guess I was kind of like, oh, my doctor's here. I kind of often think if I'd been in Queensland, I didn't even have a doctor there. So I may not have been as vigilant. So I think the timing was really incredible and definitely worked in my favor. So I just kind of went and had it checked out, but there was no lump at all. And my doctor kind of was like, yeah, well, pain's not normally a symptom. And then the radiographer said the same thing and then stopped and went and got the doctor while she was doing the scan. And I kind of knew it was something unlike anything I'd ever had. It wasn't a hormonal thing. It was nothing like that. So I sort of deep down, I think my intuition had already sort of kicked in, but it was a shock. It was a really big shock. And then I was told that there was one tumor, and then obviously went for a scan. I went for a lumpectomy, and then that showed more, and went for another lumpectomy, and then there was 11 tumors all up. So, and I was very lucky that none of them had spread through my lymph nodes. So even though there was 11, I was still kind of early stage because they hadn't spread. It wouldn't probably have been much time until one of them did. So I was kind of really lucky. Yeah. I think it's really important to listen to our bodies.
That's a really good point, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's not normal for you needs to be looked at. We all know our bodies. So if something's there and it's not normal, just go and have it checked out, because you actually never know. And I know sometimes women get really scared, but being scared and sitting on something is only going to make it worse. And we're all scared. Well, I was petrified when I went because I kind of had that gut feeling that something wasn't right. But I'm so glad I didn't sit on that and wait out of fear, because it would have made it worse.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, act on things, push that fear aside. It's really important to do that and act on things, because, you know, early detection for a lot of cancers, it saves lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was about a year of treatment for you?
Yeah, it's been nearly a year. So the actual cancer treatment sort of finished right around sort of at the end of last year. But with breast cancer, mine was hormone positive. So this whole big hormone therapy that comes after it, because they've got to shut all the hormones down in my body. And that's probably been a lot more brutal than I expected, and it's really impacted me health-wise. There's a lot of side effects with those medications. They're very serious medications. They have some really negative side effects. So I'm just kind of navigating and battling that a little bit. So where I thought by Christmas I'd be really well, and I am, and I've had a PET scan and I'm cancer-free, which is amazing. I'm really grateful for that. This second bit about, you know, the ongoing trying to stay cancer-free, it's been a bit tough, but that's okay too. You know, the cancer journey is not an easy one. And for us as a family, it was a bit tough because it was the first time we'd faced what, I guess, you know, very quickly after Drew's accident, we knew he was fairly stable. We knew it involved a lot of bones, but this was the first time we really faced that kind of mortality. Like, oh, before we knew what we were dealing with, you know, you're kind of dealing with that whole concept of death. So what if it spread? What if this? What if that? So that was kind of hard. And I think the other thing was having the conversation with the kids. I was so sad because we just had got to a point where we had moved on from all the trauma. It took us so many years to move on from that, and we just were in a really good place. So when we had that conversation, they just all kind of went, why us and why again? Like, and I said to them, I don't know, I've got no answers for that, but I said at the end of the day, it's not our first rodeo. We know what we're doing, so let's just dig in, and you know, we know how to deal with the trauma, so let's just dig in and do what we do best and get through it the best way we can. And that was kind of all I could say, really.
But even in that, how powerful is that? Like, even then, you just went into that, we're going to do this together, you know, that fight mode.
We've done it before, we can do
Yeah,
it
we
again.
can do it again, you know, and that's what I spoke about. Your resilience is just so inspiring. Kelly, my question is, what was it like being cared for rather being the carer?
It was so horrible. I'm the carer. I've always been the carer, and the roles got reversed, and it didn't sit well with me. But for the first time, I actually did say to Drew, after I was diagnosed, I said, I don't really have it in me. I'm tired. Like, I'm really tired of fighting. And he goes, no, I've got this one. So he was amazing as the carer.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, he was incredible. And I was a bit worried about his mental health. I was a bit worried that this might have deteriorated him. So I was, you know, just kind of watching that at the same time going, is this going to put him back to where he'd come from? But he was really good, and the kids were amazing. So I guess, you know, it's not a role I wanted to take on, being cared for, but they all did it really well. And I think that's probably, you know, when I said to you, take positives out of situations, that's probably one that I've taken, is the family and a family unit. We're very strong, very tight, but also we know how to kind of look after each other when we need to. Yeah. So I was really fortunate. They were amazing.
It sounds like they've had a really good role model in you though as well. We've had the way you've taken care of them, and they've come back and taken care of you.
I hope so, because I think, you know, the whole big thing in life is it's not easy and you don't know what you're in for. So if you go into life thinking everything's going to be peachy when it's not, you know, that's like what happened with us with Bailey. We were really shocked, you know, something's actually really gone wrong in our world and we didn't see it coming. So I'd like to think that, you know, they know that there's hard times in life and there's great times, but there can be hard times, and you just dig in and get through them. You know, I think that's, if that's something I've taught them, then I'd be really happy with that.
What role, like you spoke about the community for Drew, what was the community like for you when you were going through this?
Yeah, look, really everyone was a bit sad. I think, you know, a lot of people felt for us that we'd already been through so much. And again, we had a lot of support from our friends from, the local community. And whilst I was kind of on bed rest, me being me, I don't do rest really well. So I decided to plan the charity event that you spoke of. So, you know, again, trying to turn it into something good. I organized a fundraiser for National Breast Cancer Foundation, and that was incredible. The support we got from that and the amount of money that was raised. Originally, I was just going to do like a little morning tea with a few friends, and I hope I raise a few $100s, but let's aim for 1,000. And in the end, I was very lucky that we got the local club on board. I had a friend who had also had breast cancer, and she was involved with the local club. She'd been on the board and everything, so she jumped in and helped, and we raised over $12,500. And I think also for me, it was the awareness on the night, being able to speak out and speak to men as well. We wanted to make it a male event and female, not just a female event.
Yeah.
And you did well with that.
Yeah, because often we don't speak about breast cancer in front of men. It's just like, we don't talk about that. Don't talk about your boobs in front of men. So I'm really trying to change that. I talk about it to anyone because I think it's really important. And men need to understand that their wives might come to them with pain or with a lump or whatever, and they need to know how to manage that and how to talk about it to their friends. So I'm quite, obviously I'm a very open person. So I really embraced that as well and wanted to talk about having a mastectomy in a room full of men, because it's just something, and a lot of women don't even want to talk about that. Being me, I did. So, and it was really good to raise awareness and really good to raise funds. And I think it just made me feel really good that through that darkness, there was just something that could still come out of it that was good.
And that was an amazing night. And you did normalize it for men. Yeah, as a bloke in the room. You definitely did normalize it, and you weren't awkward in speaking about it. No one who spoke about it was awkward at all. So, and I had my mother there who was in her late 70s as well. And though she didn't understand much because it was, her English is not that great, she did talk to people about it the next day.
Oh, wow.
Getting a test yourself.
Yeah, she ended up getting a test a little bit after that.
Oh, that's so good to hear. And do you know what really happened at the time? I was really outspoken about it when it first happened as well. A lot of my friends all went and got checked. It was amazing, the ripple effect. So many women were messaging me going, oh my gosh, I've gone and got my scan. I've gone and had my mammogram, all of that. And I think that was really important to me. If I can just help women to get over that, because we all kind of put it off and we're late and we don't get it. And if that means a whole bunch of the local community, women in their local community, or my friends all went and got their scans done, then I'm happy with that. I think what was really nice that night too is that there was such a cross generation because of our kids. They all brought their friends. So we also had this whole group of young, late teens, early 20s. And I think it was amazing to be able to speak in front of them and bring them into that conversation, even though it's not relevant for them now. It's still good for them to know, because you never know. One of them might, very young, get a lump or go through it with a family member or something like that. So I really enjoyed having such a wide, diverse kind of group of, especially age of people, but also for a breast cancer event, having men there and young men. So my son had all these 20 and 21-year-old mates there in a room where we're talking about breast cancer and breasts. And I think, that's a really important thing.
Yeah,
because, I want him to be able to come to me if he ever felt, a lump. He could come to me and say, Mom, I've got a lump in my balls, because we want to normalize that. Otherwise they don't. And I want my girls to be able to say, oh, I've got a lump here, or my friend's got a lump. Can you talk to her? So, and especially boys, we want them to open up about those things.
Brilliant. A few weeks ago, you were involved in the Relay for Life, and the first round of Relay for Life is what is called the Survivors Lap. And you did that Survivors Lap as a breast cancer survivor with your family. What was that like, being referred to as a survivor and doing that lap with your family?
That was actually really emotional, because when we walked in, I have never really used that word and never really thought about that. I'm always happy that the PET scan said I was cancer free. And to be honest, the PET scan was only recently. So this whole survivor thing. So when we walked in and I had to line up and they said, are you a survivor? I said, yes, I am. I actually started crying through the gate, and I was crying because it was just that whole verbalizing it. Yeah. But my girlfriend who you met was there, and she's obviously had chemo as well. And she was there as a survivor. She said the same thing when she walked in, she cried as well. So it was actually good to bounce that off and realize that that's probably very normal for us first timers. Next year I may not feel as emotional about that, but this year it's the first time that I've said it. It's the first time that I was identified as a survivor. And definitely the first time I was honored as a survivor. So I found that walk really emotional and quite confronting. I was just like really blown away with how emotional I was, but it was really beautiful.
Yeah, I remember the realization for me in that walk, and like I've not had cancer, but I've had a lot of family members. And when I was talking to my friend, I said, I actually realized that no one in my family has actually survived cancer. But to see there's so many survivors.
But then you realize you did have.
Yeah, then I realized afterwards, I do have a cousin who has survived cancer. But then to realize that for every survivor, someone may not have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So
Very
my
humbling.
mother died of cancer. My grandmother died of cancer. In that lineage, there's my sister, myself. My mum had no sisters and my grandmother had no sisters. So 3 out of the 4 women in that lineage have had breast cancer. 2 of them have died of cancer. I'm a survivor, and my sister has not been diagnosed, which is good. So they didn't survive. So that was really poignant for me. I understand what you're saying, because I was like there at Relay for Life, and I was honoring them as well, but also I was there as a survivor. So there was a lot going on in my head that day. I kind of found it a lot emotionally, but also it was a really good chance to do that, because we don't often stop and acknowledge and think about those things and deal with our emotions. And I think it was a really good chance to do that as well.
Such an important moment to recognize, hey, I am a survivor.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
only have you survived this, but there's been so many things in your life that you have survived as well.
And it's such a powerful moment, eh? Like the fact that you're able to finally verbalize that. And you mentioned that you just got really emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It's definitely an emotional moment.
What was that experience like for your children and your husband who did the round with you?
Yeah, I think it was emotional for them as well. I think that probably the same. They kind of go, oh, wow, mum's a survivor. We never really thought about that. We just went through it and we just want to get through it. And then you look back and you go, I'm actually a cancer survivor. It's like the first time you tell someone you've got cancer, when you actually verbalize something, it's like anything. Once you verbalize it, it's true, right? And the first time I said that to someone, I've got cancer, it was just like, so it's a little bit like that. But I think it was a really good kind of closing off of it as well. Like we came together, we did that. And I'm sure we'll do it again. But it was a nice way, because, it's sort of all very recent for me. It was nice for us to do that again. To do that together. And I really wanted to involve them, because I wanted to acknowledge them as my carers, because honestly, they were all amazing and they took this on as much as I did. And I think that to acknowledge the carers as much as the survivor is a really, truly beautiful and important thing, because honestly, they would lay next to me when I was like sleeping and couldn't do anything. And they would drive me to the hospital when I needed to go for appointments. And like they were just always there. They'd buy me a nice candle that was the flavor I liked. They were just there the whole time. And they're the reason that I fought so hard. They're the reason that I go through all of this, because I want to be there for them. So it's really important to me that they were there with me as my carers.
Kelly, everything in life has a season.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that cancer was one of your seasons. And now being a survivor, you're entering into a new season. What do you feel this season looks like for you or feels like?
I haven't really worked that out yet. This year's very much I call it vanilla, but I say that because there's not a lot going on. But I think it's just a waiting year. So I'm doing all this stuff with my hormone therapy. I've had surgery recently 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I've got another surgery. So I think this year's the year of figuring it out, I guess. And really, I've had to change jobs because I couldn't continue in the job that I was doing once I was diagnosed. I just don't have it in me. So I'm really working out what life and what Kelly is like after cancer, because it's a very different. So I'm rewriting my life. So this year, you could honestly say this is the year where I'm rewriting that life now. And I think that as I'm speaking, I'm kind of working it out actually in my head. There was that light bulb moment there. So this year is definitely the year where I rewrite this life post-cancer. I have to prioritize my health more now. I have to look after myself. I don't have the energy levels I did 12 months ago, and I'm not sure I ever will. I'm on this medication for 10 years, so I'm sort of working out how that fits in with me. There's a lot of things I have to do now, exercise and diet, to keep myself well. At the moment, I'm definitely rewriting everything again.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for being honest with us around that. It's really important that people listen to the real, authentic truth of what's happening in people's lives.
Absolutely.
Just to come to a close, we've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to reframe the questions a little bit. And my first question, we usually ask the question, what advice would you give someone who's rewriting their life?
Yeah.
But I want to reframe that question as to what advice would you give someone that's just going through shit in life?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say, and this is a phrase that I used to say all the time to myself when I was going through everything with Drew, and I used to say it all the time. And it was probably the only thing I'd tell myself: life is fluid. I used to say it to myself, life is fluid. It won't always be like this. In 12 months' time, it's going to be different in 2 years' time. And I would say that to myself every day on those really hard days. I go, life is fluid, Kelly, life is fluid. And I think that's probably the most important thing I'd say to someone, life is fluid. So I've obviously lived through that where I was just at the hospital every day and he couldn't walk. And then you fast forward and we've been on holidays since then and we've been overseas and then you fast forward again. So life is fluid. It's, as you said, there's seasons. And so just know that whatever you're going through now, it's fluid. It will change. It moves. And sometimes you have to change it yourself. That's true, but it will change. And I think that's the most important thing. What you're feeling now, you won't be feeling the same way in a month or 6 months or 12 months. You absolutely won't.
Yeah.
I love that. Life is fluid.
Completely. Well, that almost leads into what you once told us about that tree you noticed that just withstood the test of time, this tested the storms.
Do you want to share that
Would you like to
story?
share that?
I will. So I was obviously in Bali with Drew on a holiday. And, you know, people often ask me, what's your secret for resilience? What do you think resilience? Why are you so resilient? And it's really hard for me to necessarily put that into words. And I just remember we'd been there and there'd been a storm or a hurricane or something, and there was heaps of trees down and it was still quite windy. And we were just sitting by the pool and I could see these really tall trees and they were just like moving in the wind. And I actually said to him, oh my goodness, look at those trees. They haven't fallen because they're moving with the environment. They were moving with the wind. They were bending with it. Some of the trees that were really solid, their branches had just broken up or they'd been uprooted. And these trees that were just moving with the wind and with the environment, they stood the test of that environment. And I think that's probably what I'd say about resilience is it's going with what happens to you. You can't fight it. You can't fight against stuff when you're going through those really tough times. When Drew's laying in a hospital bed like that, you can't fight it. You've got to go with it. You've got to go with what life gives you and make the best of it. And I think that's all we can do. So when you know that the environment gets tough, you've kind of got to bend and shift and move with it. And that's not always easy, but that's what will get you through. And I think that's probably what we've been able to do.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that.
If you could go back and change things, we usually ask the question, if you could go back and rewrite your life story now, what would it look like? And would you?
I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. Obviously, there's those little things where, oh my gosh, I probably shouldn't have drunk so much that night. And maybe I really didn't need that $300 dress. Maybe I'd make another decision about that. And maybe there's a few friends along the way that weren't as nice and I go, maybe. But I don't actually think that. I don't at all. I think that for me, life is what it's been and I wouldn't want to rewrite it. I genuinely love my family. You know, I wouldn't want to any changes, big changes that I would presume to make would impact all of that. So no, I don't want to make any changes. Would I change the day of Drew's accident? Potentially. You know, of course, I'd stop him going on that ride. But I don't really dwell on that because at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? And that's another phrase I use a lot. It is what it is. I use that all the time. So life is fluid and it is what it is are my two favorite phrases because it just sums it up perfectly. It is what it is. So no, I wouldn't rewrite anything at all. Maybe that day, but it is what it is.
That's what it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been a real privilege having you on this show. And if people want to check out your book and get a copy, they can look at the link on this show notes and we'll have a link straight to your book. Again, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and being so honest, because it's that I was explaining to someone, stories heal, and that's why we need to share our stories because they bring healing to others. So thank you, because someone out there needed to hear your story today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Now that we've interviewed our guest, join Charlene and I as we recap today's episode. Wow, what a resilient woman.
She just really inspires me, the way she just takes on every single challenge that she's been through. And she's so open and raw about everything as well. And just how she just manages just to take that next step and move forward one baby step at a time.
Yeah, I love that saying, we've done this rodeo before. You know, it's another, and that analogy of the tree, I'm going to use that. Yeah, because there's so many times where I just feel like, please just knock me over and put me out of my misery when stuff comes my way. But just thinking about that tree, you know, I just really thought that was powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something that really grabbed me as well.
Yeah.
She first told us, and if we just hold in, not just about holding in, isn't it? It's being flexible and just moving with the situation, allowing ourselves just not to be blown over, but just go with it.
Yeah, it's like one of the laws, one of the precepts of NLP, that they that are most flexible win, and it's pretty amazing. And she's really flexible, but I guess to holding that family together, like you can see that she's the force to be reckoned with when it comes to that family and everything they do. And I think one part that really touched me was like, again, like, gosh, how much can a family go through? And really, how much can a family go through? You know, like I knew of Kelly when Drew had the accident, but I didn't know Kelly, but I knew of the accident, and I knew what was happening. And I remember that, you know, accident because I knew mutual friends of Kelly. And I remember like hearing the stories of car taking him out from the side and how horrific that was, and them coming good as a family, you know, going through the dark period of separating and then coming good. And then as she's, you know, she had her dream job working with Disney and stuff like that. And just as, you know, her life was getting together, the diagnosis of breast cancer and that whole trial. So I think it's a real story of resilience.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people could probably just resonate with that whole thing, that after being the carer for such a long time, she found it so difficult to be cared for.
Yeah.
Because she was a carer all that time, wasn't she? So it's like, wow. You know.
So she switched roles.
Yeah.
And some people don't find that easy. And I guess, again, that analogy of the tree comes in.
Yeah. And I think from what I can hear from what she mentioned, she took that in a stride, and she took it so gracefully as well, and allowed them to have the opportunity to care for her.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share it with your friends and family. Also, make sure to visit our website at www.rewriteyourlifestory.com.au to learn more about our mission, products and services. And remember, you have the power to rewrite your own life story. So go out there, face your challenges head on, and create the life you've always wanted. We'll see you in the next episode.